Welcome everyone to the Distilled Spirits Council Ask the Experts webinar series. I'm Amy Carter. I'm the Vice President of Member Services and Business Development at the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, also known as DISCUS. We are recording this webinar, so you'll be able to see it later on the DISCUS um, the DISCUS website events section of our website, and then also on the DISCUS YouTube channel. But before I welcome today's speaker, I just want to remind everyone of the DISCUS antitrust policy statement, which is to refrain from discussing or exchanging information relating to pricing or exchanging information, pricing, marketing or sales plans, costs or confidential plans regarding output or production. Refrain from talking about boycotting another company, not recruiting or hiring each other's companies or salaries, wages, or benefits, or any other competitively sensitive or proprietary business information. With that, I just want to, for those of you who aren't familiar with DISCUS, we are the leading voice and advocate for our members and also the distilled spirits industry overall. We provide a wealth of resources and services, including this webinar, and others that just really aim to educate and share relevant trends, ideas, resources, discussions, opportunities with our members, with the industry at large, and with anybody who is interested in the distilled spirits world. Our recent Ask the Experts webinars have included topics like trends in the U.S. liquor market that was featuring experts from Nielsen IQ. We've had featured Reserve Bar on e-commerce, and then Speakeasy on direct-to-consumer e-commerce. We've had some really good insights on consumer foot traffic with Placer AI. We've had actually really good conversations about global regulatory compliance tips from TraceOne, Pronghorn, and other industry experts shared some tips for accessing capital and expertise. We've also had some interesting conversations with Women of the Vine and Spirits, specifically on the alcohol buying trends of the socially conscious. So with that housekeeping taken care of, I think we're still letting people into the webinar, but I want to welcome our speaker for today. Our webinar is called Assisting Small Business with Export Development, the State Trade Expansion Program, also known as STEP. And our speaker today is Shaditra Robinson, who is the National Director of the STEP Office of International Trade at the Small Business Association. So welcome, Shaditra.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Fantastic. We're thrilled to have you here. I know you've got a lot of great information on how small businesses can access grants and find customers in the international market space. And I think you might also you're going to share maybe some highlights or points or what's allowed and what's not allowed under STEP, and maybe how e-commerce and digital marketing factor into the STEP program and expansion. But also maybe also hopefully some of the various benefits and support that STEP offers. But maybe we can start with, in case folks aren't aware of what the Small Business Association is, maybe you can start off with like a high level overview of SBA for folks.
Of course. Sorry about that. I had to close a window. The weather's amazing.
Yes.
I'm trying to keep the windows open, but it was getting a little noisy. But once again, thank you so much for inviting me. And I would love to share about the services of SBA. So with SBA, Small Business Administration, located in Washington, D.C., as far as our headquarters. However, we do have district offices throughout the United States in every state. Some states larger than others might have one or two. And so I'll give you the information with SBA being created in 1953, and the objective of the SBA was to provide. It's an independent agency, so we are different from what we consider like Health and Human Services or Department of Defense. So we stand alone. And with our particular federal government agency, our goal is to aid, counsel, and assist protect the interests of small business concerns. So, of course, our role is to assist small businesses with obtaining counseling, obtaining loans, whether it be to finance a new business, also working with different veteran-owned, women-owned, entrepreneur-owned. We also have SCORE. So there's a multitude of different grants that we have within the Small Business Administration. So we have grants, we have loans, and we also have consultancy services so that we can direct the small businesses into the right particular programs that will be able to support them with the needs of where they are at that particular time. So that's the goal of the SBA.
Okay, fantastic. That's super helpful. I jotted down a couple notes that I might have to ask you about later.
Sure.
And actually, I should say to folks, there is going to be a question and answer period at the end. But if you have a burning question, either use a raise the hand icon or put your question in the chat, and we'll try and get to it. And then also, if we don't get to any questions, or if you think of a question later, Shaditra's information is on a slide. Her contact information is on a slide so that you can contact her directly. Again, once we post this, the recording to the Discus website events section. So I just want to make that point. And then we'll also make sure we send out the recording to anyone who registered for this event. So, and then include Shaditra's information in that as well. So, and then if you can't find anything about how to contact Shaditra, you can always contact Discus and we'll connect you with her. Excuse me, but for that, after that, Shaditra, please continue on.
Of course. So with the program that I oversee within the Office of International Trade, so that's a division within the SBA. We have multiple divisions. As I mentioned before, we have OFO, which is over our district offices. We have also entrepreneurship. We have veteran owned. So those are different offices. And so STEP, State Trade Expansion Program, is housed in the Office of International Trade due to us promoting exporting of small business products. So the STEP program was birthed out of the 2010 Jobs Act bill. So that was under President Obama's administration at that time. And what we were seeing was that creating not just jobs, but opportunities for small businesses to understand that there's a big world out there and just not domestic sales. So the STEP program was designed to help those small businesses get the training. So we target two different audiences within the small business realm. So we target new to export. So those are individuals who have never exported before. And then those that have been exporting, we call them market expansion. And so those two are target audiences. And so what essentially happens is the goal is to get them training and get them access to support with going internationally. So that's how the STEP program was formulated. It is appropriation of funds that do come from Congress every year. So when the program started out of the Jobs Act bill of 2010, we actually started as a pilot. So it was a 2-year piloted program with $30 million. So in 2011 is when we started. The way that the program is designed is that states, so the governor has to designate an entity in its state. So it could be an economic development office or the Department of Commerce or even a university with a business center there at that university that the governor feels confident that they would be the entity that can support the state and the needs of the small businesses. So that's the first step. So once the governor then identifies that individual, then the state has the opportunity to apply for the grant because it is a competitive process. Not everyone does get a grant. What we're really looking for is to make sure that that entity can support running a federal grant, as well as doing the recruitment and support of a small business when it comes to them exporting. So that's what we're looking for, amongst other things, but that's just on a smaller scale. And so once the grant actually starts, what happens is the state is then responsible for doing recruitment and also vetting those small businesses to make sure that they are eligible. A couple of the criteria for those small businesses is to ensure that you've been in business for a year. Also making sure that you self-represent that, you're not debarred, you don't have any fraud or anything against you as a business, and that you are paying your taxes on time. So, those are important documents that you have to, clarify and make sure that you're in good standing. From there, also making sure that your product, if you do have a product, is 51% US made. So that is a product that is being made, in this instance, of course, you all have distilleries. So if there's something that you're assisting that you're making, or you're assisting another distillery when it might be a small piece, that helps with the generating of that particular product. That small piece is made in the US. That's what's considered a US content, small bit, product that has been made. So just making sure that, you have a product that has 51% content. So those are the main rules that we as SBA ask the states to enforce. Of course, when you do your application, the states may look at other items as well, but they're very upfront with their application process so that you can, go through that process and making sure that you can be found eligible for those services. Once you're found eligible for the services, there are items that you will be able to take part in. But just a little bit of, history here on this slide. This is just letting you know the growth of the program over the years. So as I mentioned before, we were able to receive 30 million. The first year we only was able to award 29 million. The second year we were able to award 30 million out of this pilot. So once we had the pilot for the 2 years, we were able to see how impactful it was. Because with that being said, the governors had to designate the entities, and some of those offices in those states were dormant, like there was no activity being done. But one stepped into place and started assisting with the grant, and being able to support, administratively about 15%, but we look to target 85% of the funding to go directly to benefit the small businesses. It really did breathe life back into some of those offices that were laying dormant. And so the next year, with Congress, we didn't get any funding. But the beauty about the grant is that Congress appropriates the funding for us, and we had the opportunity to run it for 2 years. So that second year of 2012, we were able to extend it by an additional year. So the states had the opportunity to run the grant for 2 years. And then we came back with a smaller amount in 2014 with 8 million. So we did not have a large amount of states because, of course, with it only being states and territories, only 56 states and territories can ever apply. So when it came to 2014, we had less money. So we only had about 24 states and territories that were in the grant at that time. And as I mentioned before, it is a competitive process. So they did have to compete. And so, as I mentioned, the program's growth, how it has been impacting, we were then able to come back and get 17 million from Congress. And then as you can see here in this slide, we continue to grow. So we stayed steady for about 4 years, from 2016 to 2019 with 18 million. And then we went up by an additional million in 2020, 500,000 in 2021. And then since 2022, we've been able to have 20 million for the past 3 years. Because right now there will be a new grant starting on September 30th of 2024. And so that grant will be running for 2 years. What I will do before we leave is make sure that I provide you with the link that will make you all aware of what states and territories will be in the program and how much funding they received.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Hey, Deidre, can I ask you a question? Because you did
Sure.
mention that there's certain entities within the state
Mhm.
that manage the program.
Right.
The link that you're going to send, does that include the state and the entity within that state that's managing the program?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
So
great.
it will provide the state, it will provide the contact information for the director in that state with their phone number, as well as the website. And, it's very important because that's where, applicants can go to apply. So that information will be provided in that link. That's our
Great.
director.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next slide, please. All right. So what I would like to go over now is just, as I mentioned before, this program is federally funded and Congress appropriates funding to us. So of course, Congress has given us parameters that we have to stay within. And so what I'll do, it's 9 parameters that we have to stay within, and we work with the states to enforce that when they're doing their recruitment and working with the small businesses. Because of course we do have quarterly reporting. So when that reporting comes in, it's based off of these items. Next steps, please. Next slide, please. So here, these are how we formulated our allowable cost sheet. So as I mentioned before, the beauty about this program is a grant. And so what we do assist with is participation in foreign trade missions. So if there's a state and they're going on a foreign trade mission, they may be having a delegation with their governor or their Secretary of Commerce, and they're doing a trade mission, then this is a great opportunity for a small business to be found eligible and then take part with that trade mission so that they can get into that particular country and take advantage of meeting new buyers as well as being supported. Because I can only imagine going to a new country, it's a different culture, language may be a barrier, and then just making sure that you're meeting with potential buyers that are serious about doing business with U.S. Small businesses. The next is a reverse trade mission. So, say, for example, if a state has a reverse trade mission, it really is impactful where international buyers have the opportunity to come to the state and the state puts on an actual trade show in that state. So, it allows the small businesses to either do it like a road show where the state brings around the international buyers to your to your facilities where they're able to see your products and actually see you at work, or have, rent a space where you can actually put on a trade mission in that state. So that's essentially what the reverse trade mission and trade show offers. And it becomes less of a burden on the small business because, of course, when you travel internationally, you're normally gone for maybe like 10 to 12 days. And so if you're running a business by yourself, it is hard to really walk away and, close your shop down for about 10 days. It can be beneficial, of course, because you're going to be meeting new buyers, but it can be hard when you are away from your business for several days at a time. The next is the participation in Department of Commerce services. So, of course, we do work with Department of Commerce, and the services that Department of Commerce offers, whether it be Gold Key, market expansion, or even if they're putting on a trade show or a trade mission, you have the opportunity to go with them too, if that's a sector or countries that your business is going to thrive in, and you have the opportunity to go. So utilizing the STEP funding to offset for Department of Commerce services is also one of the items that are allowable. The next would be website and production translation, SEO, and localization. So what that means is if you have a website and you've done some market research and your product is valuable in maybe 3 different countries, you would like to update your website to reflect that language. That's a part of what STEP can provide. Even the localization, making sure that your website is being generated there when you do a Google search. So those are some of the items when it comes to the web base of utilizing the STEP funding for your program. International marketing media. Once again, if you're looking to have a design for your marketing, this is a tool that can be done to offset that price because I do understand it is expensive. So that is something that the STEP program can assist with. Also participating in trade shows. For example, in June, they had Fancy Food, wonderful show to attend. And so, of course, if you would like to have booths or pay for your registration, that is also something that we do pay for. So if there's domestic trade shows that do take place but have international focuses, that is something that the STEP program will support you in. The next is participating in export training workshops. So if there's, like I mentioned before, we have 2 target audiences, those that are new to export and those that are market expansion. So individuals who are new to export that have never exported before, it may be intimidating, but if they're able to get some training and understanding the resources that are available to them, it will provide them with that support. So training workshops can be provided in the state if the state is offering them. And it can be offset with the funding that STEP does offer. Of course, consultancy services. If you're looking to make sure that you're going into a proper deal with a distributor to distribute your item in that particular country, you want to make sure that someone is reviewing the documentation for you properly and making sure that there's no duplications or any hidden items that will then jeopardize you. So having that is also another plus. And then we also assist with Ex-Im Bank. So when it comes, or even credit insurance. So it's essentially credit insurance. So you can utilize Exim Bank, and then if not, you can utilize a private credit insurance, but it all depends on if your state is offering that. And then the last is item that the state, if there's something new and different in an initiative that we don't have, then that's something that the state can propose. And we have to make sure that it is something allowable. And we do cross-reference that with our Office of General Counsel because we do have a legal team that works with us to support us as well. So these are the 9 items that Congress has put in place for us to work in as far as parameters.
Shadisha, let me interrupt a second because there was a question earlier about the 51% U.S. produced items.
Yes.
And so the question is to clarify, excuse me, to clarify, any or all the STEP programs are only available to 51% U.S. produced items. So tequila made in Mexico would not qualify, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I actually had a question. So
Sure.
this is super. I love this slide because it lets people know what they're allowed to do.
Mhm.
But I just have a question. You mentioned the training workshops.
Yes.
So the training and those export training workshops. Can you only use the funding for workshops that are run by the state that has the STEP grant?
Yes.
Okay.
So the state has to implement it. And I'll go into more detail
Okay.
about that in the next slide.
Okay.
Because essentially, this is what governs us. And then we break it down a little bit more to support the small businesses. So with that being said, we can move on to the next slide and then I can, break it down some more. So here, so out of those 9, what that gives us our parameters. However, when it comes to allowable costs, these are the items that we've broken down even more that can be utilized for the states to then stay within the parameters of what we can utilize to support. And, it's funny, I always use this terminology saying it's like Subway, make it your own. And so not all, even though these are allowable costs, not all states will utilize them. They work with what works well for them. So for example, I've had a state for many, many years where they don't do trade shows or trade missions. However, they put on and they don't do airfare and they don't do hotels or anything of that nature, but they will support a small business with going to a trade show or a trade mission. Like they'll pay for their booth space or their registration. So that keeps it very confined for that state, and it works for them because they don't want to get into the nuances of when you're dealing with airfare, making sure that it is a U.S. carrier, or dealing with transportation. If there's an air carrier that's outside of it, you could probably find a better deal with paying for it yourself, but at least the offset of paying for you being at the trade show is provided. So some of the states, they just figure what works well for them, even when it comes to per diem or even hotels. If you're domestic, you have to follow GSA's per diem rates. If you're going international, you have to do the research and look into State Department. So those are some things that the state really doesn't want to do, but they will still support you with the bigger item of paying for the registration, which sometimes can get up to, $4,500 to $5,000. And so having that offset really does help a small business. And then they may be able to use points to go on a trip on their own. So, those are some of the offsets, but it's definitely where these are the items, but the states make it their own. So, getting into this list, looking at airfare, I always suggest that the small business, their skin in the game, as we would say, they pay for their airfare because there may be a leg of a flight that is much shorter if they pay for an international flight that's with an air carrier that's not a U.S. one. But if you choose to use a U.S. one, it may double their time, but we have to follow the guidelines. So, that can be, an exchange for that particular client, small business. Even when it comes to ground transportation fees, Uber or taxi, just really making sure that that's a part of what the state will reimburse for. Parking, baggage fees, once again, just making sure that the state is going to be reimbursing you for that. If not, and they make you aware whenever you become eligible, they go over the terms and conditions that they have in place and you sign that document. Also registration for booth space and, trade shows, that's very popular. And that's truly the objective of the program is to really help the small businesses because some booths can be close to $20,000, $20,000. So really having the opportunity to offset really does put a small business in a great place because it then exposes them to other international buyers. And just being at a trade show where they would not have had that access, now they have access and they have maybe 5 to 6 contracts that they're going home with to place orders. So, that's the objective, is really getting the small businesses in the rooms with these international buyers. Also, like I mentioned before, like trade mission fees. So if you take advantage of going on a Gold Key with Department of Commerce, then this is what can assist with that mission fee. As I mentioned, training programs, of course, if the state is offering that, then, that's something that can offset and you get the education so that you can, better yourself as a small business and be ready to be an exporter. Of course, currency changes, exchanges, those can be expensive. But once again, just making sure that the state is paying for those. When it comes to meeting space for the audio visual for reverse trade missions, that is the allowable cost that we pay directly to the state. It's not so much the small business. The small business just has the opportunity to be at that particular location when it's a created local trade show as far as a reverse trade mission. As I mentioned before, XM and private credit insurance. If you've already made a deal and you want to make sure that you secure yourself with the credit insurance, then that is something that can be offset. But just making sure that the state is supporting that for the state that you're, applying in. Also associated and allowable travel expenses. So, just really making sure that if you need a visa, travel insurance, those are also things that we can assist with and offset because it can be expensive. Fees for shipping sample products. So say you're going to a trade show and you need to take your products with you. Fees for shipping samples, that's allowable for you to, because what good is it you going to a trade show and you don't have your products with you? So so this is one of the expenses. Over the years we saw the benefit of it and we added it to our allowable activity sheet. Compliance testing. Say you get to that trade show or you have a business to business meeting and in order for your product to be entered into that country, you have to have compliance testing. So that is one of the items that we also assist with offsetting that price as well. So just making sure that the state is offering that, but we do, it is a part of the allowable cost sheet. The trade data subscriptions like Wiser, that's what the state would have to purchase. So the state is purchasing that, but you as a small business have the opportunity to take advantage of utilizing that service. So they would assist you with, looking and seeing what the service is providing and making sure that it would be able to support your business. So that is one that the state has to use. And as you can see, we give them parameters that it has to stay within the grant funding cycle. It can't go outside of the grant funding cycle. So it's very important for us. As I mentioned before, translation of a website, making sure that if you do a market research and your product is valued in a country you didn't even have on your radar, then, utilizing the trade translation of website will be one way to assist you with breaking into that particular market. And then, of course, design and marketing media, and then attorney fees for reviewing over distributor agreements. So those are, the items that we do support, but it just really is important that when you do your application, you talk with and if there's something you really want to target on this list, that you mention it to them to make sure that that is something that they are supporting.
So Shaditra, we have a few questions. So before we go on to the next slide, let me get to some of these questions in the chat. So the first question, I think, is referring to the previous slide, referring to number 6 on the list, participation in trade show exhibitions. Can the trade shows be foreign trade shows?
Yes. Yes. The purpose is for you to be in foreign trade shows. So if it's, for example, one in Farnborough or Arab Health that takes place in Dubai, yes, that's the assistance that we do provide for you to get into those particular foreign trade missions and trade shows.
Thank you. That's what I thought, but that was a good question that somebody asked. And then the next question is, in Kentucky, only employees of private companies can apply for STEP grants, especially toward attending trade missions or trade shows. Would it make sense for local nonprofit economic development employee be awarded a grant to represent a number of companies located in their community and not able to make trips away from their businesses. So I guess
Mm,
it's a maybe a
right.
stand-in, for
Right, exactly. So it's as
a
if
brand
that
ambassador.
person, exactly. That is something new. I have never heard of that as an example. And it's actually something that I can, talk with my legal team about, because it's something that we have never heard of, an individual being an ambassador or even how it would work. So it is something that I can jot down
So,
and I can. Mhm.
Shaditra, I've copied the question. I'll email it to you afterwards.
Oh, perfect. Because you see, I just picked up my
Yeah.
pen. I was going to write it down.
Thank goodness for the cursor and the highlight and copy.
Okay, sounds good.
We
Well,
can do
thank
that.
you. So yeah, so
Um,
I'll look into that, and then once I can get an answer, then I'll get that back to you.
okay, fantastic.
Mhm.
And then one of my colleagues asks, can
Mhm.
distillers use the STEP program to cover travel to a discus export activity, such as a trade show, which discus is using USDA export promotion funding to participate in?
So that's a good question.
Question over here.
So in all actuality, no, because you can't fund with you can't utilize federal dollars to go along with other federal dollars. So it'd have to be either or. So you can't, it's what we would consider commingling. So no, it's not allowable for an individual to be utilizing federal dollars on one half of the trip and then utilizing federal dollars on the other, for the same trip.
But you know what? It never hurts to ask.
No, it does not. And
I'm
it's
glad.
all about awareness. And
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
something, making you all aware of.
Okay. And then last question I can actually answer. Someone asked, will we get a copy of these slides? And yes, we will send all registrants and all participants a recording, a link to the recording of uh, this webinar, and then and all the slides will be in the recording. Um, yeah. Okay. So I think we can move on.
Yes, we can. So let's go to the next slide. All right. And so this is just, bringing forth, letting you all know about items we don't allow with the program. So, of course, passports, immunization, and we put immunization on it because we know sometimes traveling, you have to have yellow fever. And, so we don't pay for immunizations. Those would be more that the client would have to be responsible for. Expenses related to entertainment, new product development, cell phones, television and radio procedures. And then, of course, at the time we had COVID, so we don't cover if someone does have COVID. We actually ended everything. We were never paying for COVID testing, or if someone had to stay in a hotel, it was just like you will be going at your own risk. So those are things. And then reward points for airlines. So that's why I made that point to say it is better if the client just pays for their own airfare, but that's not something that we would allow the state to submit to us. And then we offset and pay for that person, even though they used points and then they want cash back. So we just really try to be very upfront with what we don't assist with. All right, next slide, please. All right, the next is e-commerce. So e-commerce really came into place for us during COVID because, of course, our biggest push for many years has always been trade shows and trade missions. And with that being, business to business meetings, gold keys, and things of that nature, whether the state was making trade show, taking small businesses on the trade shows for trade missions, or someone was doing them individually. So, of course, with all of that happening, it really made us have to start thinking outside of the box and saying, okay, how can we continue to have our small businesses in the US stay connected internationally? So we then started working with e-commerce and having the utilization of the website fees and the reimbursements of these items, of this particular new item that we added. So we saw a benefit to it. And so we actually kept e-commerce as one of our allowable costs. So, so it is still there. Okay, next slide. And then, of course, digital marketing, that's the biggest push. Everybody walks around with their phones in their hands. We have so much on social media, so when it comes to QR codes or, just clicking on a link, that's how individuals are being promoted not just word of mouth anymore. So assisting and making sure that your digital marketing is up to speed with where things are now, we do assist with that. So that's one of the other tools that we really started amplifying during COVID because we had no other choice. We weren't doing as many trade shows or trade missions as we were in the past, which was really our biggest push. But digital is what we had to move and pivot to. And
Yeah.
so did see that as a great benefit. And so we wanted to make sure that we supported the small businesses in that effort.
Sure. I want to ask a question,
Sure.
Shadisra, sorry. So does this mean that on the e-commerce and the digital marketing side, that
Hmm.
so if somebody who has been authorized by the state to participate in the STEP program,
Hmm.
if that company then hires a digital marketing firm to help them design some sort of international digital marketing that happens within this grant period, or
Hmm.
they want to design their website or whatever, or so can they use the STEP grant for those purposes?
Yes.
Okay, so they can
Yes, they
hire
can.
anybody, well, theoretically hire whoever they want to help them do whatever
Yes.
marketing that they want to do.
Correct.
That's good to know. And I just want to say for Discus members, um, there are partner members that are part of Discus that offer those types of services, to other Discus members. So
Mhm.
if anybody wants to learn more about those types of partner members, please reach out to membership@distilledspirits.org or email me or whatever, anybody that you know at Discus. And we can help connect you because they might be able to offer some discounts. If you combine a
Right.
discount with, a grant,
Right.
win-win-win, I think. So,
Absolutely.
okay,
Absolutely.
great. I think we can go ahead and if you're ready to, Shadi, try to move to your next slide, we can do that if you'd like.
Yes, yes, we can. And that's coming to the conclusion
Oh, great.
of, what the program really is designed to do. And the design is to truly help small businesses get exposure into other countries so that they can, one, continue to build on their business, create new jobs, sustain jobs. And, that's a very big push for us as far as just in the administration itself is creating and sustaining jobs. It's very important
Mhm.
because we know that when we are able to create and sustain jobs, it doesn't just help the business, but it helps those families, that individual support themselves and their families.
This was super helpful. I learned a lot. I think this is really fantastic. I think this will help a lot of our members and others who are um, considering export, or trying to jump into the international realm. So if anybody has any questions, I think people have figured out to use the Q&A feature. So please feel free to ask questions. And I'm just going to ask one more question while we wait to see if anybody has any questions. So there might be two questions though. So for one, you mentioned there were other parts of SBA that offer grants, and you mentioned
Mhm.
SCORE. There's different grants related to women-owned businesses, to veteran-owned businesses, and also to entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm assuming that, or can people go to the SBA website and easily find those organizations, or if they email you, can you connect them to? Because we do have
So,
a number of distilleries that are women-owned or that are
mhm.
specifically veteran-owned, and so
So the best thing and what I would also, what I planned on including as well
Mhm.
is our link to our district offices.
Okay.
That's their role. Their role is to provide consultations with those small businesses. So what you would do as a small business, just go to the website, go to the district office in your state, and then schedule a consultation. There, they'll go over the 19 grant programs that we do offer, and from listening during that consultation, they'll be able to guide you into what particular grant program or what office or what loan would be best suited for you. And so that's the goal is for me to make sure that you have the small business contact the district office, schedule a consultation, and then they can, work together so that they can get all of the resources that will support them for where they are in their journey.
That's great. I love
Mhm.
it. This is super helpful. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Um, So I think before we close, I want to remind everybody of some upcoming Discus webinars and resources. So related to education, applications are now open for the 2025 Discus Academy leadership programs. And there are year-long leadership programs for rising leaders, for executive leaders, and a women-focused program. Shadisha, that's why I was asking you if the training programs are specific to, have to be run by a state. So it sounds like this would not be appropriate because some of those programs, some of the Discus Academy certificates and programs and whatnot do include export sales and marketing and export promotion and all that. But it sounds like it may not be applicable. But if anybody's interested in learning more about the Discus Academy programs or the Leadership Academy programs for next year, just visit discusacademy.com.
Mhm.
And then the leadership programs are at /leadership certificate program. So there's that. And with that, I wanna really and also remind people that this particular webinar and past Discus webinars will be available on distilledspirits.org/events. It'll take a couple days for us to get this webinar on, so be patient with us. But with that, if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me. I really want to thank Shaditra for spending time with us and for doing the slides that we can then share with everybody. I think those are super helpful leave behinds. And I like how succinct they were. Here are the 9 things that you can do, and then here's more detail on them. So kudos, and I think that's going to be really helpful to our members and other participants.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for, inviting me to come so that I can provide, information about the program. And I see in the chat, the link has been provided for the STEP directory. So we do presently have 2 grant programs running at this particular time. One is going to be ending on the 29th of September, and one is still in force. And then a new one is going to be starting on the 30th of September. So definitely, go ahead, start looking around at the website, look and see if a grant is in your state, and, go to that website and, start becoming familiar with the application process. And even if you have questions, reach out to the STEP director and they'll be able to guide you on, different things that are going on in the state and if they're going to be having any webinars to kick off the new program.
That's great. And it's great. This is actually, I didn't realize how good the timing was for this webinar, with the one grant ending September 29th, but the new grant period starting
Yes.
September 30th. So we'll make sure to get this information out to people as soon as we can.
Okay.
Again, thank you so much for joining us today. That concludes our webinar, everyone. Thank everyone for joining, and you may feel free to disconnect.